Hello, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast. Are we crumbling as a podcast as we inch to the end of the season? Who knows? We'll find out. You be the judge. I'm Kevin McCaffrey. Over there, it's Adam Amawala reporting live from Chicago.
I know this might be one of the only away games that I've recorded in Chicago. I can't think of another time. I've certainly been here during our tenure as prolific and very important Cubs podcasters.
Absolutely,
But
every week.
yes, I am in Chicago. I got to headline Zanies last night. It was a good time. And then tonight I will be attending the game with Ken Schultz. Actually, last night I asked for the score in the middle of my set. I was just very distracted, and I was like, I'm going to be honest, I am thinking a lot about the Cubs right now. I'm going to need a score check, and whatever the answer is very much going to impact the way the second half of this set goes. And someone was like 5-1, and I was like, all right, I'm good.
That's funny. Were you recording? Do you have that as a clip?
I'm sure. Yeah, I assume the club was recording. So yeah.
Okay,
hopefully I will.
that's fun. That's a good clip for the @Away Games Pod on Twitter and all the
Exactly.
socials.
It's arguably a better clip for away games than for my own.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fairly niche as an Adam Amawala clip, but as an away games clip, it works quite well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is good. I'm glad it was rare for the past week and a half. Good vibes. The Cubs blew out the Pirates, which is what you're supposed to do to the Pirates most years of the century, and certainly right now when the games matter for one team and not for the other. You got a lot of highlights. Cody Bellinger, first home run in a while, and smoked a couple balls over 100 miles an hour. That's nice to see. Then we got Seiya Suzuki homered. And by the way, just to give a little rundown of where we're at on the year, Seiya Suzuki's number 2 on the team in OPS. In OPS plus, he basically, or just OPS, excuse me. Seiya is at 121, 21% better than the league average on the year now at this point. After that big midseason slump, and then his few games rest, he's come back and he's been easily the second best offensive player on the team over the course of the year. So that's been very cool to see.
It's amazing when that works, because I feel like more often than not, you see the moment where somebody's struggling, they sit for a couple of games, and then it just doesn't seem to have that much of an impact. But it was literally like that exact moment. Somehow Seiya was able to just like clear his head and reset, and now he's been the guy that we have wanted him to be since then.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and that's probably a good thing to mention here, because I feel like Cubs discourse, the idea of resting dudes has taken on a life of its own, as if it seemed. I've seen a lot of criticism, I guess specifically of David Ross, for not resting guys and blaming that on some slumps, and I just kind of don't see it that way. I mean, I think there's guys who we could have rested, but Seiya Suzuki was a specific case. That was a guy who if you've followed him, if you've read the reporting on him, the Cubs have struggled to get him to work less, because he just over prepares so hard and puts so many practice reps in that he seems like he needed to be forced into stopping doing that for a minute. And once they did, it made sense. But rest on its own, a day of rest, is not magic. It can help people. But I think I'm not with that narrative I've seen as much as like an overarching, this is why they're slumping now thing. And also, I would put it more on the roster construction, because rest for whom? You know, there's not like a lot of, especially as Nick Madrigal just hit the IL, and there's we've got several guys obviously at the back of the bullpen. Alzolai's down, whatever. I just don't think this is a roster that was built to really have much more rotation than this.
Yeah, and of all the things that there are to criticize Ross about, I really don't think that's one of them. I mean, because the point is, if you're somebody who really believes, oh, these guys are worn down and they should have gotten more rest during busier stretches, I can guarantee you that anyone who's saying that, if Ross ran out a lineup of, Master Bloney and Wisdom and, Barnhart before he was DFA'd, we all would have been bitching about it, and rightfully so, because to your point, there is not the depth on this roster to have those days where you can do that. Now, if you want to, nitpick here and say, oh, well, in when the Cubs were playing well and some of the games where they were leading by a good amount, like maybe we should have taken guys out earlier in games. I think that's a fair criticism if that wasn't happening. Like, yes, does Dansby Swanson need to be out there on a 90-degree day if the Cubs are up 10-1? I don't think he does. But again, that's a pretty specific thing to criticize Ross for. Now, if you do want to criticize him for not utilizing Canario at all, and then finally starting him, and the dude immediately, it's one of those things where Ross, I'm sure, maybe his brain doesn't work like ours, but I have to think that there's a tinge of like, I'm so happy that he did that, but fuck.
Yeah,
like, it just makes me look bad.
Yes, of course he's rooting for his team to do well. David Ross wants to make the playoffs. He wants things to go well, and he chose to put Canario in the lineup at 9 at DH last night for Canario's first start. So yeah, I'm sure he wanted him to do well, but I totally know what you mean, where it's like when Canario comes in and immediately almost murders the left fielder with a double, like hitting, like Brian Reynolds looked like
he was just ducking.
Yeah, he's like kind of slipped, but it looked like he was hiding from the ball for his life. It was a 105-mile-an-hour blast at him in left field for Canario's first hit, a double. And then Canario, it looked like he just stretched out to sort of poke a ball. Like, it did not look like like he fully caught the ball or a full swing, and he hit a grand slam on it.
Yeah, I know it seemed like the wind was blowing out that way. Certainly, even based on Swanson's, I don't think that ball gets out on a different day. But
and literally no other ballpark for Swanson.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's hilarious. So it's the anti Jan Gomes in Arizona, which we'll talk about later. But with Canario, I think it speaks to how strong he is. And I feel like I weirdly referenced this specific home run too much on this podcast, but it reminds me, like, do you remember when Manny Ramirez on the Dodgers hit that crazy home run against Sean Marshall on like a low curveball that he just like flicked into right center? It was in that year that in 2008 when the Cubs lost to the Dodgers.
Was it in the playoff series?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, yeah.
It was that same series as the stupid James Loney grand slam and all that stuff. But
that's the one.
My point is that with Canario, it's not like he had this gigantic swing. It was like a 2-strike swing that he poked 15 rows into the bleachers. So pretty cool moment. And I'm glad that the Cubs weren't playing the Mets, so that Pete Alonso didn't launch Canario's first hit onto the rooftops.
He would have chased it down. He would have absolutely climbed a cup snake, like he's fucking Rapunzeling out there to grab the ball and whip it even further. It was cool to see. And I think when Canario got called up originally, and he'd only had, I think, one at bat before this in his time up on the roster, I said offensively, you're going to see a little bit like what we had with Nelson Velazquez. And Velazquez also hit a grand slam this year that was important. So that's quite literally exactly that. But yeah, Canario's a guy who's got extremely good bat speed, great natural power, and he's played all 3 outfield positions. So we've only got 11 games left in the season. But if you're talking about resting anybody, Canario's a guy who you could see maybe if you DH Ian for a day or DH Seiya for a day to give them a little bit of a break in the stretch run here. You could see Canario filling in at one of those spots. Center field is probably going to be Tauchman, Bellinger, PCA, but yeah.
So, I mean, how much of the games in Arizona did you watch? Because the last time we recorded, it was after the Cubs won on Monday against the Rockies, and until last night, the Cubs have not won since then. They lost the second 2 in Colorado. They lost 3 in Arizona. Were you watching a lot of those games?
I saw bits and pieces. I was doing shows in Denver and Boulder all weekend, so I was like, how the timing worked out. I didn't get to see a ton of it, but I was following on my phone, and it's obvious. I watched a little bit of the Jordan Wicks game at the end of it, where obviously he gave up a few runs immediately and then buckled down a little for a while, but it was just in a run where the Cubs obviously the offense couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I watched almost every inning of every game, and much to my chagrin. But that Saturday game was among the more painful losses that I can remember. Just like, I mean, I think they led 5 separate times in that game.
I didn't see that one at all. I saw like everyone losing their minds online about it. And shout out to I guess a couple CHGO guys, Cody Delmondo, I believe, and Delmondo and Brendan Miller were at those games, and I think Cody went to the games in Denver first, and then to those. So God bless. But tell me about that.
Cody did what I did in 2017. Now, granted, the stakes were not as high because it was earlier in the season. But if you recall, I went to 3 Cubs-Dodgers games where the Cubs got swept. And then on the Memorial Day, went to a game at Petco where the Cubs also lost. And I was like, when you're going to 4 games on the road, you do not expect the Cubs to lose all 4, especially the 2017 Cubs, who like were a good team, and
Yeah.
arguably this team is certainly a good enough team to not lose all 4 games, 2 of which are against the Rockies. But going back a little bit, I mean, you start with that day game against the Rockies, and that was the classic like kind of Tyone blow up game where he was not helped by his defense. Pete Cronin dropped a fly ball, which I mean, the Denver sky and sun is tough.
Oh yeah, he lost a ball. Pete lost a ball in the sun. Was that the same game that Ian just dropped a fly ball right before a home run?
He fully Soriano against the Pirates, Brant Brown against the Brewers. And I mean, I didn't hear him talk after the game, but I'm sure Ian would be the first person to tell you like that's a play that has to be made. And then literally the next pitch is a 2-run home run.
Yeah,
Rockies go up, they don't look back. And then in Arizona, I think the thing that everybody was rightfully most frustrated about was that the Cubs lucked into missing Gallen and Kelly and couldn't do anything against Fott, who at least is, I mean, he's like a young guy, so he's got upside. But to not hit Zach Davies, like I tweeted it from our At Away Games pod account. Well, Zach Davies is a gross person in other ways. Yes. Shout out to ghosting your wife. But that honestly almost impressive to be that bad of a person.
Yeah, ghosting, I mean, and just it's logistically difficult.
Logistically challenging, no question about it.
He's a crafty pitcher, though, you know? I mean, he's changing speeds on his wife and, you know, really changing locations on his former soulmate. So, you know, this guy, he can't do it with velocity. I mean, he left his wife at a higher velocity than he's ever thrown a pitch, but...
I hope he ends up with Juliana Zobris so they can have each other.
It'd be wonderful. The worst baseball dating app.
Zachy. But anyway, I mean, the Cubs did not score against Zach Davies, which to me, like I tweeted it earlier that day. I was like, if the Cubs can't hit Zach Davies tonight, I am joining the panic bandwagon. I think I've been reticent to do so. I have believed in this team. They've dealt with adversity before, and in other moments where we thought they were out of it, they've proved us otherwise. But that was a game that to be 1 strike away from winning. Yeah. Especially after some other like really crazy escape jobs. You had Drew Smiley in relief pitching really well. The Diamondbacks had the bases loaded and 1 out, and Smiley got out of it. But to lose in that manner, to be a strike away, then Wisniewski gets hit, the ball like pops up. Swanson, people keep talking about like Swanson should have caught it. I think the play was so bizarre that I'm not even sure that Swanson realized that it hadn't touched the ground yet.
Yeah,
I think probably in that exact moment he's trying to not let the ball go past him or something. Like there has to be a reason that he either didn't pick up where the ball was until it was too late, or there's some like Swanson's a good enough player that I'm sure if he could go back and like recognize the situation, he would have laid out for that ball. But all that to say, you know, that the tying run scores. Base hit to right field. Suzuki makes a throw that's like up the first baseline, where if it had been on the third baseline, Longoria is out. And it had been a long time because of the Manfred man, because of the ghost runner. It had been quite some time since I had seen a Cubs game where they lost that excruciatingly and it took up that much of my life. Because I remember those games from back in the day where you, especially on the East Coast as a Cubs fan, you're up until like 2 or 3 in the morning and you're like, God almighty, if the Cubs don't lose this game or they don't win this game, like what have I just done with the last 6 hours? And it very much had that vibe. And I give the Cubs credit for coming out last night and getting a win. I was afraid that the vibe at Wrigley would be that kind of weird energy where people are just like expecting something to go wrong, but it seemed it's from what I saw, it seemed a little bit better of a vibe than that, and also weirdness from the Arizona weekend. Marcus Stroman coming out, pitching out of the bullpen and pitching on back-to-back days. That's crazy.
Injury is really weird. I mean, they gotta be. It's just. I mean, it's the last. We have 11 games to go here. It's desperation time. But kudos to Marcus Stroman for being ready to do that. You know, for coming. It's not easy to go back to back, and he's not a reliever. Like he's not used to going back to back. So that is some. I'm glad he got the day off yesterday and didn't have to appear in the blowout game. Right. So we have him down a little bit, because that could be an important arm to use a few times out of the bullpen here in the final 11.
Yeah, I mean, and he was used in what would have been a safe situation, and I don't know that that's the plan for him necessarily. I think it was like, hey, we're trying to win this game right now. Who gives us the best chance to do that?
Right.
But yeah, and honestly, I'm sure from Stroman's perspective, not that he doesn't want the Cubs to win or he doesn't want to help. I'm sure he does. He's a very competitive guy, but like, he's also going into what could be an opt-out year. So I'm sure that he very much wants to prove to potential suitors, if he does decide to opt out, that he is like healthy and ready to go. So I would think that that factors into his willingness to come back out there. Otherwise, maybe he would have like wanted to shut it down and not even risk re-aggravating something. But
Right.
speaking of that, we've already seen Michael Fulmer go back on the IL for re-aggravating the same injury that he was dealing with, which is a forearm strain, which is the exact thing that Alzolay is dealing with. And we don't know if we're going to see Alzolay. So
Yeah. And
it's
that's
going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's such a huge loss, because Alzolay's, he's so fun as a closer, but he's been so good too. Like, it really does seem like he really found his speed this year. I do think Alzolay, I know when you're grinding for every game, the margins are so thin, you have to use your best guys. But Alzolay, I've said it too many times now at this point, that was a guy I do think was overused when you look at his history, his injury history, and the fact that he'd never carried a load like this in terms of appearances and stuff. He just shouldn't have been taking 4-run non-save saves when he was, and it sucks to see him down like this. And Fulmer too, who has had like an up and down year, but has obviously turned into a really important guy. When the Cubs really flipped the season and went from 10 games down to up over 500, he was on a real heater for a while and was really important. So it's a sloppy bullpen, but Luke Little's been pretty good the times I've seen him too. He's been, he's fun back there. And I saw the ghost of Brad Boxberger return, for Christ's sake. I saw him on the mound this weekend. It's getting weird here at the end of the season.
It was I was watching that game on Sunday night in Florida when I was visiting my sister and brother-in-law and nephew, and we had happened to order some food from Culver's, which has made its way down to Florida. Shout out to Culver's.
Oh, okay.
We were literally eating box burgers as Box Burger came into the game, so it was very fitting.
Very appropriate. He's really got got some synergy on the name and subtle marketing stuff going on. Also, Marcus Stroman wise, we referenced him. He's the Cubs Roberto Clemente Award nominee that came out this year. I've had mixed feelings on Stroman as a dude this year, to be honest, but I guess congratulations to him on that nomination. Basically, that's come because he partnered with Chicago's Lost Boys youth baseball program, hosted kids at a movie screening, donated books at various events, and like hosted a group from the Merging Vets and Players Initiative. This is from Jordan Bastion's story on it. So, congratulations to Stroman.
No, that's great. That's objectively great and good for him. I think my opinion on Stroman, the dude, is that he's he's kind of a complicated fellow, and some things he does I feel great about, and some things he does and says I feel horrible about. Like it seems like he has two speeds, and one of them is like, I am playing the banjo at a children's hospital, or also I am blocking someone on Twitter because they, don't agree with Kyrie Irving. Like it's a weird dichotomy.
Yeah, it's weird, but so whatever. I guess he's got the nomination this year, so good for him.
So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, as far as looking back over the past week, is there any other looking back over this week, things to note or sum up before we look forward?
I would say the one thing that I have, and I believe you were the responsible party, but we gladly and swiftly blocked an asshole who was suggesting that Justin Steele is not the guy. He let everybody down by having a bad start. Just complete dipshit, idiotic stuff, really.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I definitely saw something like that on Twitter. There was some guy just like not even just like blaming Steele for a bad start, but like just talking a bunch of like aggressive shit about it. And it's just like weird. There's a lot of losers on Twitter and stuff. Obviously, There's a lot of losers everywhere.
I would say arguably the one who owns it is the biggest one.
He's a bit, big old dipshit. And Steele had a bad start. I mean, that happens in the course of the year. The guy's the second best ERA in baseball right now. Yes, the Cy Young Award is probably Steele's probably going to finish second. Should finish second, not third at this point. Spencer Strider's probably could finish third. But I'm not even sure. I mean, the strikeouts are nice, the whip's nice, but the guy's got a 3.7 ERA. It's just like that shouldn't be close. But Blake Snell, coinciding with Steele's rough outing, was Blake Snell going 7 no-hit innings last night. So I think that's probably separated it. So Blake is likely going to be one of the few guys to win a Cy in both leagues now. So good for him. But Justin Steele is an ace. He is fully an ace by any definition now. He's a number 1 starter. He had a rough start. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah. And also the kind of rough start that he had in particular, he made a couple bad pitches in bad spots and they were punished, right? Like there are times where you make a bad pitch with guys on, with 2 runners on and you get away with it. The Diamondbacks are a good team. And like, that doesn't mean that I'm okay with the fact that the Cubs had a golden opportunity to bury them and lost 6 of 7 games. I think that's like insane, especially losing 3 of 4 in Chicago. That's what really kills you, is like playing in Arizona, playing in Colorado. Those are not easy places to play. I think as much as we would have loved for the Cubs to go in there and tear the world down, I think you're probably taking a 3-3 on that road trip if that's what it comes down to, because that at least keeps the Diamondbacks where they need to be. And I've talked about it so many times in terms of like the difference between a sweep and winning 2 out of 3. We saw that big time, right? If the Cubs just salvage that 1 game on Saturday, the Diamondbacks only gain 1 game over the weekend instead of gaining 3. And, it's so many people have been talking about like what this reminds them of. And I'm certainly, we all have our trigger points as Cubs fans. I agree that it does feel like 2004 is a little different because the expectations for that team were truly like, this is a World Series team.
And the team was better. They finished with, I think, 89 wins that year. Yeah.
It was a different time. There were not as many teams getting into the playoffs. This feels a little bit more to me like 2019 when like they were right there and then the wheels just started to come off. But just to kind of broaden it a little bit, there's been a lot of discourse online about should Ross keep his job if the Cubs don't make the playoffs? What has Jed done right and wrong? And my opinion on all that is like, it can't just be as black and white as people want it to be. Like, with all due respect to my great friend Ken Schultz, who I'm going to see right after this, I don't think that everything Jed has done is bad. Like if we're going to shit on Jed Hoyer for signing Mancini and Hosmer and Barnhart, then it's also fair to give him credit for signing Stroman and signing Bellinger and signing Swanson, right? Like both of those things can be true at the same time. And similarly with Ross, if you're going to say that it's his fault that the Cubs are losing, then are you saying that the Cubs, when they're winning, are winning in spite of him, and when they're losing because of him? Because frankly, I think that's ridiculous.
I do too, and I think I am more on this isn't like, I don't think David Ross is the best manager in baseball. I don't think I don't even know how good he is, but I find myself this season, almost feeling like I'm almost arguing with myself in some ways. Like I'm defending David Ross I think generally now, where I'm like, I don't know what you want him to do with this roster, because I'm closer to I think you bring it up how like, I think Ken, our friend Ken, also doesn't think everything Hoyer has done is bad, but I think
no, not at all.
Is looking at Ken's obvious shirt is fire Jed, sell the team, which we should get him for his birthday. But it is like, I think where your expectations for what your situation is, and the overall job Jed Hoyer has done to this point, I would say personally I look at as less of a good job than I think David Ross has done with the roster he's been given, which there's nuance to that, and I'm open to arguments either way. But watching people online this week has been, I've never felt more sane in my life as a baseball fan than watching Cubs fans on Twitter this year. And a lot of and a lot of the ones that listen to us, I think, and interact with us are like I'm biased, but this is sort of, you find each other in this way, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
like they are more of the sane ones. But I'm watching people who were talking shit, hashtagging Jed's League sincerely all year and dunking on people when the Cubs got to 500, when the Chicago goddamn Cubs got to 500, dunking on people. Those same people, and I'm not quote keeping receipts because I'm an adult and who gives a shit. I don't care, but you've seen these
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
Twitter who are over this weekend were like, the Cubs blew it. They've got no chance. The people talking shit to us and like subtweeting us are saying, and I'm like, they didn't blow it. They're currently in the playoffs. Am I losing my goddamn mind? We've got 11 games left and games against the Rockies and the Pirates. This season is not over, you weirdos who are like dunking on everyone, Jed's League in it, and quitting now. What the fuck is your deal?
I don't understand. And listen, I was in a bad place after this stretch of 5 losses in a row. Like I think anyone who's listening to this podcast, anyone who's on Cubs Twitter, we all have an unhealthy and bizarre relationship with a baseball team. Like that is the baseline for anyone who would even care about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I don't understand the mindset of being so dejected and so upset that you're like, well, in my mind, they've already blown it, so I don't even like care about the last 2 weeks of the season. We're right there. If the Cubs missed the playoffs, of course it's going to be disappointing. Of course that's going to be frustrating, and we're going to look back on certain games that we lost or games that we played early in the season with a fucking AAA roster. Of course we're going to do that, and that is what we should do as fans. But why on earth would you care this much about the team and give up now when we've got 11 games left and the team is basically in or near a playoff spot? Like this is... Do we want them to be competing for a World Series every year? Of course, but in the context of what we have, like this is quite literally about as good as we could expect this team to be. If they make the playoffs, that is the ceiling for what I thought the team could be. I should go back and listen to our season preview. I want to say that I was the most optimistic, and even then I was like,
I think so.
I think maybe the team wins like 83 or 84 games and possibly sneaks into a wild card.
Yeah.
But
I think you said 84, which is, I mean, that's going to be close.
Right. So, I really don't understand that kind of fan mindset. And this team,
yeah, it's weird. It's weird. It's been weird to see online and, to hear on a podcast or two and like and I'm not talking about being like, holy shit, this sucks. Things are falling apart. That's fine. But genuinely people being like, the season is over. You're in a playoff spot. Let me tell you where we're at right now. 11 games to go. The Cubs are, look, the division, bye-bye. That's gone. Basically, they're 6 games behind the Brewers. Congrats once again.
I mean, listen, if they make up 3 games in the next week, and then
you're right.
Series, because they play them at the end of the year, I would say it's like a less than 1% chance that the Cubs win the Central, but it is... Because of that head-to-head at the end of the year, I think if you are within 3, then it is, of course, technically possible.
Yeah,
although I don't know who has the tiebreaker.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you win those 3 games, I think the Cubs would if they sweep, because they beat the Brewers at least once this year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, sorry to
no, but tiebreaker is a good point, because as I'm recapping where the Cubs stand right now, the tiebreakers actually are very important, because they're 6 games behind Milwaukee with 11 to go, 3 games behind Philadelphia for that number 1 wild card spot. I'm also not even really looking at that too hard right now, but the Cubs are a half game behind Arizona for the 2nd spot and a half game up on Miami for the final spot, and 1 game up on Cincinnati. So that's a lot of numbers. Also 3 games up on San Francisco. Let's not really even worry about that right now. Basically, what you have to think is the Cubs...
Which is really like 4 games up, because the Cubs have the tiebreak over the Giants. Also.
Correct.
That's the only team they do have the tiebreak over.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point. Because the Cubs need to be a full game ahead of, I guess at least 2 of the 3 between Arizona, Miami, Cincinnati. So the Cubs can't tie any of those teams. If Arizona, Miami, Cincinnati, and the Cubs end the season with the same record, the Cubs are out of the playoffs. Right. So these tiebreakers really matter. And once again, that goes back to that early season sliding doors moment in Florida when the Cubs couldn't score anybody and were losing to Miami all over the place. So once again,
and also the Cubs, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, beat the Marlins the first 2 of 3 in Wrigley, and then it was the classic, like, we just can't win on Sundays, and lost the
Right.
final game. Because if they had won, then they would be 3-3 against them. And then I guess maybe the next step is like their records against the same opponent, or their divisional record, or whatever it would be. But the point is they would have split the series against the season series against the Marlins. But
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing, right? The Cubs are this weird mix of, like, they've got some veteran guys, they've got I would say a not insignificant number of people who have been on World Series winning teams in Bellinger and Swanson and Jan Gomes and Kyle Hendricks, and I'm sure more than that. So when it really boils down to it, I think the Diamondbacks get in probably. The Diamondbacks have been playing really well. We've seen it way too much the past couple weeks. But when I look at the Marlins and the Reds, if we have to be better than, I kind of see the Cubs getting it done more so than I have faith in the Reds and Marlins. And maybe I'm talking out of my ass, and I'm not, respecting Marlins magic, which is that they're going to, like, sneak in and then win the World Series, because that's what they always do.
Right. Yeah, without ever winning a division in their fucking lives.
Yeah,
That
so annoying.
that could be.
But I don't know. I guess it really boils down to this next week. I think we've got 5 games left now against the Pirates, 2 against the Pirates, 3 against the Rockies. You've already won the first game, which is huge. Coming into this homestand, the bare minimum was winning both series and going 4-2. You really need to be doing 5-1. Obviously, winning all 6 would be fantastic, because after that, you go on the road, you play the Braves, then you close out the season in Milwaukee. Now, the Braves, I would imagine, may start to rest some guys, but I'm sure their pitchers are still going to be pitching. You're not going to, like, if you're the Braves, you're already going to have some time off after the season anyway.
Yeah.
So there's not as much of a need to rest people in the way
No,
that
you have to stay in rhythm.
ordinarily.
Yeah, a little
Totally.
bit.
And the thing with the Brewers that I think people need to realize is, I don't care if the Brewers wrap up the division 4 days from now. I guarantee you that the Brewers and Craig Counsell would love nothing more than to keep the Cubs out of the playoffs. In the same way that we would want to do the same thing to the Brewers. If the Cubs had clinched the division and they had 3 games at home against the Brewers, I guarantee you we would all be rooting for the Cubs to keep the Brewers out of the playoffs, because we don't like them, and that's how division rivalries work. The interesting thing, though, is that where the Cubs are right now, if the season ended today, they would be playing in Milwaukee for those 3 games, right? If they end up getting into the 3rd spot, then most likely they would play the Phillies. Neither are particularly easy matchups, but there's a part of me that would rather them play Milwaukee, not because I think that it's even a better matchup, because then at least, like, you get to have a shitload of Cubs fans up at those games.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to help a lot in Colorado and Arizona, but
no, it didn't. But also, to me, as far as the ceiling for what I think is reasonable for this team this year, whatever, go ahead, Cubs win the World Series. I don't give a shit. But the like, playing Milwaukee in a 3-game series and eliminating Milwaukee before the Cubs get eliminated,
right,
to me, that's a hell of a successful season.
Yeah.
From what this is like,
you know what it would be? It would. I was sorry to interrupt. It would be very much like 2015, where it's like, yeah, they didn't do the thing, but they beat the Cardinals, and that was pretty awesome.
Absolutely. So I think that's the closest thing. And as I'm looking at the schedule here, the Marlins, they play the Mets today. Then they have 3 against Milwaukee. So, something's got to happen there between 2 teams that we don't like in this circumstance, or generally playing each other. But then the Marlins end the season with 3 games against the Mets, who have no reason to care about anything, and I'm not sure they've cared all season. And then 3 games against Pittsburgh to end the year. So that's pretty easy by Miami. Now let's look at Cincinnati and what Cincinnati has coming down the stretch. Cincinnati has Minnesota today, then 3 against Pittsburgh, 2 against Cleveland, 3 against St. Louis. So, not crazy difficult there either. And then Arizona's schedule as we come down the stretch. Arizona's got the Yankees for 3, who've actually been playing very well lately, and then White Sox for 3 and Houston for 3. And they play San Francisco today. So Arizona's probably got the toughest run in.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, right? And who's to say that the Giants won't get hot and win some games, and maybe they'll become a problem, but I think everyone's least concerned about them right now, especially with the Cubs having the tiebreaker. But if you're really looking at the Cubs, the Diamondbacks, the Reds, and the Marlins, 2 of those 4 teams are going to get in.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any reason that one of those 2 teams shouldn't be the Cubs. Like,
I agree.
Yes, this stretch has made me nervous, and like, even going 5-5 over those 10 games rather than 2-8, you would be in the driver's seat in terms of playoff position. And the fact that they came into the month with a 94% chance of making the playoffs, and now it's down to like a borderline 50-50 shot. Of course, that's not great. I tweeted this as well, but I look back more so to that series in Cincinnati where the Cubs ended up splitting the 4-game series that included that doubleheader. But like, they were right there. They had save opportunities in those middle 2 games, and even if you win one of those, right, and win 3 out of 4, then that means you're gaining 2 games on the Reds instead of 0. So there's a lot of things to look back on throughout the year, and hopefully we don't have to do that until after the playoffs end. Like I would love for that to be the case. I think even if the Cubs are at risk of not playing a playoff game at Wrigley, like, it would still be great to see them in that environment. I don't know about you. I have already started like tentatively marking off, at the very least, like the wild card dates for times that I want to not do shows. But realistically, I think my view is like the ceiling for this team, best case scenario, is NLCS, because I think if you get to the playoffs and if somehow you get out of that first round, it gets harder for a team like the Cubs, who are a worse team the longer the series get. So I think there's a world in which you get a little lucky, you have some good pitching performances, you get out of that first round since it's just best 2 out of 3. And there's also a world where sometimes the worst team beats the better team in a best 3 of 5 in the DS. I think if it comes down to the NLCS and the Cubs are playing the Dodgers or Braves, like, come on.
Dodgers and Braves seem on a different level, and the Brewers are kind of approaching it at this point. I mean, the Brewers are not the Dodgers or the Braves, but I think there's tiers to this where the Braves have measurably one of the best offenses of all time. The last thing approaching this, I believe, was Houston's cheating season, in terms of how good they are in relation to the rest of the league. They're just, everyone hits 25 bombs on that team, and Matt Olson's up to 52, I think, which is insane. Yeah. But I think I look at it as the Braves and Dodgers are on one tier. The Brewers are kind of a tier to their own underneath that. Maybe you could throw Philadelphia in with them a little bit, but I think the Brewers they've just proven themselves to be a little better. But yeah, man, I mean, this, it sounds crazy to say, but reading Twitter and just online, I'm not giving up when the Cubs are currently in the playoffs. And they're playing awful teams for the next 5 games. You're right in that when the final week is Atlanta and Milwaukee, regardless of how much they care, you really got to go on a heater this week. So the Cubs need to be sitting a game or 2 above the other teams they, by the end of this week.
Yeah, the way I see it, I posted a poll on our Twitter, and I would have to see what the results were. But coming into yesterday, I was like, look, Cubs have 12 games left. What do we think is like the minimum amount that this team needs to win to make the playoffs? My feeling is 8-4 gets it done. And one of the ways to get to 8-4 is the Cubs have now already checked 1 win off of that list. You've got 5 left against the Pirates and Rockies at home. There is no reason you can't go out and take 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you are now 5-1 in those 12 games. And even if you split the last 6 in Atlanta and Milwaukee, you're still 8-4 over that stretch. Of course, we would love for them to win all 12 games. But in terms of like realistically, winning 2 out of every 3 games for this last 12 games, my feeling is that that's enough to get it done.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's, we're in the part of the season you want to be in. Some weird shit can happen.
Listen,
let's go get it.
Believe me, when I booked this show at Zany's, I don't know, 2 months ago, if you had asked me if I thought I would be at Wrigley watching Justin Steele pitch with the Cubs still in a playoff spot, I would have said, I don't think there's any way. So I am very grateful that my one time at Wrigley this year is watching the Cubs in an electric environment, when last year at this time, and the last couple of years at this time, it would have been like 12,000 people and people just there for the cup snakes and
just getting the hot dogs, baby. Yeah, just getting after
them dogs.
Well, we've got
a whole new meaning to having that dog in you. Just literally
an actual Chicago dog in you, briefly. Guys, that's it for us, I think. We're at Away Games Pod on Twitter, on Instagram, on all the things. And if you're, if you didn't go to Adam's show, don't go say hi to him at Wrigley today.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
show your face.
Yeah, but otherwise, Adam and Ken going to be trying to bring the luck to Wrigley this evening. For our Cy Young candidate, Justin Steele. Any parting word, thought, anything, Adam, before we shut it down?
I got nothing. I hope that a week from now we're here talking about the Cubs still being in a playoff position, arguably in an even better position, maybe with a little bit of a cushion. But we shall see how it plays out. Either way, I'm enjoying watching this team. It's been a slog the past couple weeks, but I'm grateful to be able to care about baseball and not feel like a complete lunatic for doing so.
Yeah, hell yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next week.